But how different it used to be, Smallwood, this city, yours and mine. More yours than mine, you would have said back then. I came from what your father called the quality. You from what my father, more fondly than you might imagine, called the scruff. Animals were everywhere. The smell and sound of them was everywhere. Cows, goats, chickens, horses, dogs. Goats wandered about at will, the way cats in cities do today. If they lingered long enough in one neighborhood, they were designated lost and were claimed by someone. But it was a rare goat who would stand for being tethered. So they more or less remained common property. Everyone milked them. For children, to go out milking was not much different than to go out picking berries. It was a common sight, children chasing goats down Water Street with buckets in their hands, children in winter thirstily gulping warm goat's milk from tin cans. I was afraid of the crossing sweepers, boys wielding birch brooms who hung round intersections, waiting for people to cross the streets. They walked backwards in front of my father and me, heads down, furiously sweeping the dust or snow, clearing a path for us. My father, once we reached the other side, would give the sweeper a penny, sometimes more, depending on how poor he looked. The same boy would then sweep another pedestrian back across the street on the very track that he had swept for us, redundantly sweeping it again. That it was just a disguised form of begging, I didn't understand. On the same downtown street, we might be swept across like curling stones half a dozen times by the same fierce-faced little boy, who, I felt, was picking on my father, and who, to my indignation, did not sweep a path for anyone who was not well dressed. What I miss most are the horses. The sound of the city changed gradually as the horses were replaced by cars and the streets were paved. I remember the sound of a lone horse clopping past the house when it was dark outside. The double plumes of steam that issued from the nose of every horse when it was cold. It seems now that they vanished overnight, that one morning I woke up and there were cars instead of horses in the streets. In these same streets, I saw women twirling parasols and walking arm in arm with men in tall black hats, and children with their bare legs mud bespattered, hopscotched between the potholes, and men gingerly rolled casks of port the size of steamrollers from Newman's, where it was aged in mine-like cellars, to ships that sailed to Boston and New York, where the expatriate quality drank it with their meals. My father drank 1 glass of Newman's port a day. The wooden water tanks set out at intervals along the streets, where people wearing hoops from which buckets hung went to get their water. I would watch in wonder as some hoop-wearing woman staggered by, bearing half a dozen pails of water. The smell of the salt fish, I missed that too, though I could never stand the taste. The first few hundred feet of land beyond the harbour is no longer spread with cod, nor is cod stacked stories high in the premises of Harbour Drive as it used to be. Some of the streets were arched over by fish flakes propped up on mast-like stilts, on top of which salt cod was laid out to dry, and beneath which, in the shade that reeked of brine, people took cover from the rain while the traffic passed. The harbour. I loved the harbour as only a child, to whom it was nothing more than a place to walk, could love it. I remember how the harbour looked when it was crammed with bare-masted schooners,